Better get a different angle. Well, I'll tell you what, that turned out fairly fine. You guys enjoy that little snippet of concrete work? One-stop shop. I pretend to do it all. Now, I mean, this is about as much as concrete as I'd like to pour by myself in one shot. It's a small pad, but it was like 32 degrees yesterday. I'll tell you, that's not for the faint of heart. Them concrete guys, they work hard. So we're moving on. We need a foundation stem wall, obviously, be the next step. We have an offending log here in our way. So we're gonna go ahead and soup mix that right off and work from there. Rebar, we're doing ICF block, bracing, some pipes to go through. Anyways, you sit back, follow along, something will happen. How to fuel? Of course. Why would you fuel it up when you sharpen it? That just makes too much sense. It's slightly different than just chopping up a block of firewood, I'll tell you that. All right, now that we got this all tidied off, we squared these. If you watched the other videos, this log used to stick away out here. It was kind of a feature piece of the house when this originally was just an open porch. But for the sake of what we're doing, she's in the way. So bucked off, and then our wall is gonna be framed flat up against this here. We'll probably have to do a little more trimming, but we'll get to that stage once we get to the framing and a guy can shoot a line on it and trim what needs to be trimmed. So next stage would be layout for the foundation wall. We're gonna use a plumb point laser. It's Stabila LA5PG 5-point layout laser. If you don't have a layout laser, come on, get with the times. And no, it's generally not supposed to look like this. I followed a guy, I can't remember the guy's channel now. He said he took all the levels in his trailer and he threw them in a dumpster, and he said it's 2020, buy some lasers. Well, 3 years later, so you should be caught up by now. We're gonna shoot in the reference points for the corners and the foundation. Now, this is where new construction meets renovation. You're gonna have to fight the urge to make things perfect, because I'm gonna almost 100% guess that none of this is gonna be perfectly square because it's 50 years old and it's made of logs. So we're gonna do our best to, we gotta of course match that foundation, come out, cross, and then we're going to, we're shooting to line up with that upper wall for the rock work. So essentially what's gonna be up there is where that cedar siding comes. That is where I want my wall to land. So we have to account for the 1/2-inch plywood, the 2x6 wall. We're gonna come in from that, and then up top, I'll put a drip flashing out and over. So a gentleman named Norm can do some fancy mason work on the front of the house. So that's down the road. Let's break out the laser. I like to keep things in their original box. I just feel like it'll last longer that way. It's got a nice little case it comes in too. Velcro. Of course, keep extra batteries on hand so it swivels just like that. This debuted in one of the most famous Spruce Stomper videos to date. Recess lighting and a kitchen renovation, funny enough. Okay, so we don't need to know exact spots. We just need 2 points to pull a chalk line from. You don't got to get too sophisticated. You just shoot the dot up, and when the dot hits where you want the dot to go, well, bingo bango. Yeah, that'll be deadly. And okay, so it shoots a point up, and then obviously it shoots a point down. So we just make our tick on the concrete. So you shot your dot with the plumb point. It's marked there. And then I just measured over from the form to the point, 7 5/8, and then just marked it on our form back here. So I got something to pull a chalk line off of. It's only a foot away. It's gonna make never mind about it. Take note of your measurements as you go. Whilst we know this isn't gonna be perfect, it's nice to know that you're in the ballpark. So if I had 7 5/8 down at this end, and I got 10 inches at this end, well, then we got a problem. So you got to be able to keep track of something. Okay, nice black chalk lines. And then all we did on this end is simply measured over to the foundation from the form over, and I'll be more than close. We can fiddle with the block a little bit to get square when we put them in. So we're gonna get the first course on. The first course of block has to be cut a little bit because we have an oddball height here. These are Logic's ICF to come in 16-inch dimensions. So 3 rows would make 48, and we're a few inches shy. So it's messy and it's not that much fun, but it's no big deal. We got to cut, I think, a dozen blocks and some rebar, because to tie the 2 foundation walls together, we're doweled. We've already pre-drilled, and there's going to be some rebar dowels tying the old and the new foundation together, so we don't get any not that this slab is ever going to go anywhere, but let's get to cutting. So for a double check of height on the block, because like I said, we got to trim them, I just layout laser set so it's shooting a beam at the height of the existing foundation. This is the top of the wall we want to get to, and then just with the stick and a tape measure, just shot multiple points on the wall where the block's got to sit. 44 3/4 to the top. So subtracting from 48, we got to take what, 3 1/4 inches off the bottom of the block to hit our mark. So that's what we'll do. Always good to double check. I find best with the epoxy to get all set up and do it all at once, especially when it's hot out. It's quite hot today, and the hotter this is, the quicker it cures. What is this? Sika Pro Select Anchor Fix. Anchoring adhesive, plastic, eh? They give you 2 tips for a good reason, because if you have to stop at any point in the process, it hardens very fast. So you can see by the tip of the bottle, it's 2-part, the black side and a tan side. So you just nip the top off of that with your dull pocket knife. And then just screw the tip on. And it's got a spiral inside like that, so it mixes the adhesive for you. You don't need to puncture it or nothing or cut the tip off. It's already ready to go. Do yourself a favor. If you got to buy this stuff, get a good brand name like Sika or something like that. Like your hobby home hardware store is going to, like our home hardware, they sell a house brand, just says home hardware. The house brand stuff is garbage. It's total disappointing garbage. So, all right. Basically, of course, I've carefully blown all the holes out, free of dust and debris, just as the bottle says. Give her a couple pumps there. See, it's starting to work into the tip. 2 different colors. If you got too much one color, Well, we're not gonna worry about it because we're putting lots in, so all the way in and then just pull back as you go. Like that. More the merrier. And then just take a bar and drive her home. Seal the end up, never hurt anybody like that. You might as well use lots because you got a whole darn tube of it and it isn't good for keeping. It's a one-shot deal. But do make sure you have enough for both sides. We got a good amount in there. And the ends, just to seal up the hole. I like to do anyways. And last but not least, I'm gonna do the other side. I'm gonna leave you guys here, I think. It's a messy business cutting the block. Just trimming that 3 1/4 off is yuck. Just enough to be yuck. Not too tool intensive. Little trim square. Hold her at the 3 1/4 and then give her a scribe. Now, a skill saw works exceptionally well for this, but it statically charges the foam like you wouldn't believe, and it makes a horrible mess. This seems to make less of a mess. Now, you might be saying, well, why don't you just use a knife? Well, you can't use a knife because embedded in the ICF are plastic webs, hard plastic, for fastening to. So you got somewhere to anchor screws, bracing, siding, whatever you're doing, they're in the block. So how does that go? A knife just doesn't cut it, literally. You really got her beat. Just got to do a corner and a couple more blocks and arrivederci. Done deal. We just got the last little piece right here to go in before we continue on to the next course. So like I mentioned, inside are plastic webs. That's what holds the block together. So if you do have to cut yourself a little short piece, you measure up. We need 4 1/2 inches, which will give us bang on. So we'll cut it here. And here. And wherever possible, if you cut it on these pre-made factory lines, then the socket, the pin and socket design, the Lego block that holds it all together, will still line up. And if you can't, which is inevitable, unless, I'd encourage, if you're building something, pick the block and pick all the materials, be involved in that part of the process. That way, you can make it so you don't have a bunch of goofy cuts and all this kind of thing. Ideally, right? I mean, it's not a perfect world, but it can be done. Or what you end up with is, oh, hello again. You flipped around backwards. You end up with one of these. And what are we looking at here? Well, this is just a random cut where they're butt together because this length wasn't a nominal dimension that fit the size, that fit the logic block, right? So you got to just cut it so it fits. So you're going to end up with a seam there that's not interlocked. And what you do is, I'll show you when we're all done, you take a piece of plywood and you screw it over top of that into these plastic webs to hold it together, because that'll be your weak point, right? But unavoidable. Brace, brace, and brace some more. Whatever they say when you look it up online, oh, this is what we recommend for bracing, not enough. Try some more. Have you ever seen an ICF block blow out? Me neither, and I don't intend to. Of course, sleeve over the electrical, the conduit and stuff. You don't want that trapped in concrete, just in case she's got to be taken out. And then I like to take the tie wire and wire the rebar to the webs. It clips into the webs. That's the intention of the web. But and these are cheater tie wires. If you're a DIYer, this is what you're gonna want. They come in 6 and 8 inch. They're pre-made. You just go like this, and then a twister tool like that, and you're off to the races. Now, professionals are gonna say, well, that's cheating, or you just need a roll of wire. Well, yeah, probably. But I'll tell you what, it's not a skill set this guy's looking to learn. I'm quite fine with the pre-made tie wires. Not as fast, I'm sure, but I also don't do this for a living. So some guys that just tie rebar, or we got a broken web in there too, I gotta fix that. They can hustle. So I tie the rebar, not only so that way I know the rebar is gonna stay where it needs to be when we pour, but also I'm tying the rebar at the joints. So it's just one more level of structure to hold together when this is dumped full of concrete. Because, you know, the pressure, this is just going to be poured with a truck and a chute, so it's not too bad. But them guys with the pumper truck, they play for keeps. And, but it'll blow this stuff out of the water. So much rebar. Okay, that's that. I got a couple things I still got to figure out. I don't know what I'm going to sleeve the sewer line with. It does need to be sleeved. It can't just be poured right in for the same reason. It won't crush it, but if you need to get it back, you need to be able to get it out. So we might just build a little temporary plywood box to go around it and punch that out after, and then you just foam around it, seal it up with tar, and she's good to go. All right, on to the gravy rolls. They're a lot easier now at this point. You want to watch, the corners have a long leg and a short leg, and you want to alternate them so the joints don't line up. So when you buy the block, you got to make sure you get the right stuff, the right number of which corner, so they're opposite each other is what I'm trying to say. And that's basically it. There's no forcing, there's no bashing, it just clips together. They get a little damaged sometimes. Just need a little more block. If it feels like it's not a good fit, it's probably not. You'll see this all gets strapped, because what will happen is the pressure of the concrete, anywhere it can get into a seam, is gonna wanna float them, so. The last row, didn't you know? Start with the corners, they say. Uh-oh. I got 2 corners that are the same. That's okay, we'll have to brace them up real good. She'll work, it'll be fine. Ooh. Easy meow. Now the last row gets what they call taper top block. I'll give you an up close look at that here in a sec. With a pretty runny slump for ICF, you need all the rocks to flow in and around all the webs and stuff. There's a lot of crap in here, all the plastic. You know, if you look at this, you can see, I mean, you can see why. The mix is small rock and fairly liquidy. Not so liquidy it's not maintaining structural integrity. I'm not a concrete guy. I don't know the rules. I know what to order. So it'll flow in there pretty good. All right, next on the docket, form lock. This part's satisfying. Why? Because the forms are loosey-goosey, and you snap the form lock in the top, and bam, gets her pretty darn straight. So I like that part. Form lock, just a fancy word for zigzag wire. So we'll get you set up here and show you what it looks like. Oh yeah, and the poor old soup mix there. Well, the soup mix had a bit of a stroke out. It seems it had an ailment that we'll cover in a separate video. She's gonna require a little bit of teardown. Looks like it had an air cleaner malfunction, and I don't know if you know this about 2-cycle engines. They have an appetite, but you feed them too much sawdust and they get a tummy ache. You know, it's not actually the greatest example. That looks pretty darn straight. It adds a substantial degree of rigidity I don't know if you can tell, but the Rode wireless mic went dead. I haven't owned it that long, but apparently it is not up for an entire workout. It gets upset. Now this fits in real tight. So get her snug, go right to the corner. And push it all the way down. Now the other thing I like about the new DuraBlock better than this stuff is their Formlock click locks, or at least it did, click locks into place, whereas this doesn't. Well, it looks the same on the camera, but not too bad. Stiffens it right up. That's the point. Keeps it stiff. Formlock. None of these names should fool you. You brace till your heart's content, because nothing makes people uppity like concrete spilled on the ground. I just use a pair of bolt cutters. I get tired of the consumables, you know. A good zip cut this now is not cheap, so I just get tired of buying it. So this works just fine and is consumable free. Now I try and cut them somewhere where they're welded together, but I don't always happen. I don't know what the humidity level is, but I'm waiting for a fish to swim by through the air. That's how it's moist, is what I'm saying. Concrete pouring day, friends. Hot and smoky. Not as hot as yesterday. Caught me up in the attic. It was like 30 degrees just outside. Never mind what the temp was in the attic. Anyhow, we got ourselves a little formwork set up here. I'm gonna give you a sneak peek. We'll get the concrete in it. It's my theory. Even if it looks like it doesn't need a brace, it gets a brace. These short walls can be real deceiving because they hold up a lot of weight. So I just run strap. The corners are a weak point in my mind. I've never had a blowout. I've never seen a blowout. But any story I've ever heard about a blowout, corners, long stretches where there's little bracing. So you beef it up. So basically we've got our corners strapped. And then on the front face, I like to go along. And these are just ties. So basically what it does is it ties the blocks together, because remember, they're exactly like Lego. They just rely on their own friction fit. Or if there's a little gap on the inside, the concrete can lift those Lego blocks apart, and there's no putting them back together after that. So these ties just pinch it together. Kick plate on the footing. So what this kick plate does is it keeps your formwork on its straight line, and it doesn't allow it to go anywhere. It can't shift out. Most of the time you're just gonna see a kick plate on one side. Again, there's a bunch of these blocks that, you know, they got a little damage or a seam, because you gotta remember on the bottom course, the only thing holding them together is the friction on the concrete that they're sitting on top of. There's no, they're not interlocked with another block. So this kick plate allows you to have something to screw them to so they can't lift up, they can't move this way. And then I just go ahead and I put one on the inside as well. Why? Well, because better than being disappointed. I just precariously get over the wall here without turning into Humpty Dumpty. And then typically on the inside, depending on your site, you might have to do it on the outside. These are braced back to a kick plate that is anchored to the concrete, because we need this space open for the truck to back in. Or you could have braced it on the outside and just driven stakes into the dirt. Maybe not that compact gravel, so this was definitely the easiest option. So you plumb your wall. In this case, with the plumb point laser, we shot a dot from here up to where the wall's gonna end, making sure to account for your sheeting thickness. You know, you don't want to forget that, and then find out you're out a ½ inch. And then corners again. An extra 45 brace ties this wall to this wall. This brace back. And then of course this rebar detail is all tied in to the old foundation. So you got your course of rebar in each row of block. Uprights, what did this block say? Every 4 feet, there's an upright bar. And then to hold our ledger, so essentially a ledger goes on the face of the concrete form, and that's what all our floor joists are gonna hang off of, because in this case we can't have the floor joist sitting on top of the wall because we need that 9¼ inches. This is floor. Finished floor height is right here, and we still need that 4 feet of concrete. So we have hidden here somewhere concrete Simpson ICF VL 8-inch ledger brackets. So these get poured right into the concrete. Of course, the concrete goes through the holes all around. They're rated for just shy of 1,700 pounds of support for each bracket. So there's a calculation for the floor load and plus a bunch. It actually worked out we only needed 4 of these brackets, but I put in 6 because you gotta account for the span of the ledger board as well. You don't want just a bracket, one at each end, and opportunity for flexibility in the middle. So we've got 2, one on each end, one in the middle, and we'll have 2 ledger boards, and then the same here, and then our 2x8s will span, and we'll show all that when we get that far. So that's pretty much it. Pour the concrete in, run a string line, do some double checks, adjust while the concrete's still wet, and then rock and roll from there. So again, more bracing, better than not. Like spots like this, why is there so much wood? Well, because that was an odd joint. I don't know if I mentioned that in the other part of the video, but they don't interlock there. That's a seam because these are 4 foot nominal. So if you have you gotta have a stop point somewhere. So you just brace it all the heck inside and out. Well, and hope you didn't forget anything, because once it's full of concrete, pretty tough putting anything else through it. But we got her dialed. We've got a conduit down here and a spot for a gas line blocked out. Things like this. So there's an electrical conduit, so we got a sleeve to run the electrical conduit through, and then the gas line, there's gonna be a riser here, and then it's gonna come into the interior wall, but it's gotta be hard pipe, black iron pipe. So we just put a couple blocks of wood here, so there'll be a void in the concrete, which will allow us to come out and into that crawl space. Convenient. I'm telling you about it because it helps for me to, run it through my mind. Double check, and of course, I blew and vacuumed out the forms because all that's supposed to be in there is concrete, not styrofoam and wood. So with any luck, the concrete truck will be on time. I was just having another thought here about the bracing of the forms, because I've been on jobs where I've, especially if you got other guys that do a lot of this kind of work, I guarantee you what they would say to me. They go, "Oh, it's not necessary." And it'll show you for each different block, there's a different recommended style of bracing or a frequency of bracing. And that's great in ideal conditions. So what you got to take into account is it's probably not always going to be ideal conditions. Now this, we're just pouring with a truck, so it's really gentle pour. It's just going to be slow and steady. But if you're doing this and you're pouring like an 8-foot wall, even a 4-foot wall, and you got a pump employed to do this pour, here's going to be two variables that you don't have any control over. One, you don't get to run the pump. The pump truck guy runs the pump, and you don't get to run, typically, the end of the hose. Now, even if you do get to run the end of the hose, very little control on your part. You can only point it. If something goes wrong, all you can do is point it away from the form, waste concrete. You're relying on the pump guy, and they are paid to get it done. Now, the pump has tremendous force. It blasts it in there. So, like on the bottom, you're literally reliant on styrofoam blocks, something that's reminiscent of the old white styrofoam coffee cup, that you'd get at the community breakfast or something like that. Just thicker. That's what it looks like. So are you telling me that you have so much faith in that manufacturing process that you're not going to beef it up with a little bit of wood? I don't think so. 3/4 inch, or form ply Yeah, sure. I just put a kick plate on one side. There's no way that concrete is going to break off the bottom 8 inches of a plywood form that's in good condition. But I don't trust this stuff. So that bottom kick plate, the extra bracing, the tying the blocks together, the ledger board, the rim board on the top, I got one on the inside. That one was necessary because I need something to attach my angled braces to plumb the wall and to hold it in place. But then on the outside, which I'll just show you, the reason for the one on the outside is, again, we're dealing with a weak material. These are taper top blocks. So as you can see, they have a taper to them. There's your 8 inch, but by the time you get up to here, you've gained an inch, inch and a half. Look how thin that is. Look how thin that is. The reason is that's your supporting concrete. Your wall comes out to here. Your framing member sits on this ledge of concrete on the taper top block. So there's no way that I will confidently trust 1 inch of styrofoam to do anything. Not to mention, they get walked on. Especially on a bigger pour like today, it's just me and the truck driver. The truck driver, he ain't gonna hop up on the form for any reason. But if you hire a pump and say they send a couple of placers with it, these fellas are gonna hustle and they're gonna walk on the top of the form. You cannot walk on those taper top blocks. And in my opinion, you can't walk on any part of the foam block unless it's got that wood band on top. So might be a couple things that people point out as maybe not necessary, doubling up. But if you're careful, in this case, this was all rough cut lumber the client had on hand for bracing. So it was no cost. If you're doing bracing, just be careful. If you factor in the construction materials for your wall framing and you use them to brace your ICF, you know, whether it's 8 or 12 or whatever boards, I've even done it on the shops, 16-foot 2x6s. You can use them as bracing, just don't cut them off. You get all that material back intact, in piece, and you can use it twice. Then you don't have any cost for the bracing, and you can use it in the construction process. So anyways, my thought on that. This is where the prep pays off. Everything's all marked, so we know exactly where to put these. Grab 2 minutes at a time. Measure over. That'd be our wall there. Of course, if you can get it through the 14 million layers of rebar. Oh no. 3 in the dirt. There's a lot of stuff to get it around. There. We're getting close to the end. Anchor bolt. Just when you think the concrete work is done, you remember that you needed to plug the dryer duct hole. Let's see if we can't do that somehow. There's foam in the crawl space, so it won't. There, that worked good. I'll go get another shovel full. We'll be right back. Shovel 2. We're gonna need a third. Gonna need a third. So the idea is to fill the bulk of it, okay? Because I know what you're thinking, that ain't gonna stay, you're right, it's not gonna stay there, but it fills the bulk, right? Then a guy can do like a parge coat over top and then seal it. When we're doing foundation sealer, we'll seal the hole and nobody will ever have to worry about it. Like that. Oh man, that's gonna work good. Part of a bucket of mortar repair patch. We'll parge coat that. Is that the right word, parge coat? Sounds right, I like it. And well, Bob's your uncle or something. Be buttoned up like none other. Oh, and look at this, a garden hose. Perfect. Okay, last but not least, a double check for peace of mind. You can see the green dot, 5-point plumb, and then it shoots that reference dot up there, which is just inside of that cedar siding. Exactly what we want. Let's just check it in one more spot here where we can see the foam. Place her down. Oh, have it flash because it's too far out of level. And right on the money. So it's only 22 feet, so if we're good in them two spots, the corners can't move. That means, well, we've had some degree of success. So this concludes the concrete pouring, that portion of the project. And this video, I don't always know what the next adventure is going to be. All I know is there's going to be one. So stick around. Thank you very much.